the US sees Iran as an antagonistic nation, and Iran calls the US Shaitan-e-Buzurg, the great Satan. So Iran's number one and number two enemies interchangeably are Israel and the US. What makes Iran stand apart from many other nations is their appetite for risk. India has suffered decades of Pakistani terrorism funded and financed by the US. That's what we have suffered. The Kashmir exodus that happened, that was all done by Pakistan with American funding and American blessings. America is right now supporting Pakistan because Pakistan is on their side. It is their attack dog, let's say. Okay, I don't want to be derogatory by comparing the nation to a dog, but you know what I mean. Pakistan has even bigger internal problems, and a great amount of its own military strength, or whatever you want to call it, is used in just keeping the nation together.
नमस्ते. आज हमारे साथ फिर से है अभिजीत जी एंड आई हैव ऑलवेज बीन ग्रेटफुल टू हिम क्योंकि I'll try to talk in English because he always talks in English. So I've always been grateful to him because he came to our channel when I did not even create an account for my channel. So he kind of laid the foundation for this channel and I'm truly grateful for that.
Always a pleasure to come and speak with you. It's always fun talking to you. So thank you so much for having me again.
Yeah, thank you so much. So let's start today. Recently, you went to Abu Dhabi to do something which has not happened ever. It sounds very counterintuitive, but you went to interview. I don't remember the name of the sadhu, but you went there for the upcoming inauguration of BAPS Mandir. Swaminarayan Mandir. So please, can we have something about that? Then we will go on to our geopolitics.
Yeah, certainly. So there is this new Swaminarayan BAPS Mandir that's coming up in Abu Dhabi, on the outskirts of Abu Dhabi. So it's so incredible to even think about this, that a big Bhavya Hindu Mandir is coming up in the Arabian sands, in a Muslim nation on the Arabian Peninsula. And it's happened because of the magnanimity of the ruler of Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who has been kind enough and magnanimous enough to allow, to approve the construction of this temple, and not just approve it, he has donated land for this to happen. So that is kind of an indicator of the incredible strength and robustness of the India-UAE ties, and it's wonderful to have this happen. So I went there. And I had a conversation, a podcast with Swami Brahma Vihari Das ji, who is one of the most senior leaders in BAPS. And we did this conversation on the premises of the temple, with the temple behind us.
Yes.
And it's almost finished. When I was there, it was almost finished. All the finishing touches were being put on it. And it's going to be inaugurated on the 14th of February. It's going to be inaugurated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, and most likely by the Sheikh.
So he himself is going to be there.
Yes, most likely. So that's what's going to happen. It's coming up soon. So we had the Ram Mandir just recently inaugurated. It's now open, and now we're going to have the BAPS Hindu Mandir also, which will be inaugurated in Abu Dhabi. So it's going to be a kind of spiritual shelter for all Dharmic people in the Gulf region, especially in Abu Dhabi, in the UAE, where everybody can come together and congregate and mix with each other and find spiritual, whatever they're seeking. So it's a mandir that has 7 different murtis of various gods, including the Swaminarayan ji himself and various other gods and goddesses from various parts of India. So it's a Hindu mandir. It's not just a Swaminarayan mandir. That's what it is, and it's a very beautifully carved temple with sandstone that's been brought in from Rajasthan, carved in Rajasthan and shipped to the UAE. It has marble that was brought in from Italy, then carved in Rajasthan, and then shipped to the UAE. So it's all almost come together. And yeah, it was a wonderful experience. I'm very grateful to Swami Brahma Vihari Das ji for being for so kindly inviting me and spending time with me. And I spent a lot of time with him off camera also. Wonderful interaction with him. One of the most amazing people I have met. And overall, it was a great experience. So yeah, it's something that's coming up soon, and it's something we'll all look forward to.
Yeah, because the pictures I've seen that you have posted on Instagram, at least, it was so beautiful, the backdrop, mandir, and I'm like, wow, this is properly a Bhavya Mandir.
Yes.
The same way how we see Ram Mandir coming up, I think it's along that same lines. So yes, recently you have been into a lot of podcast hosting yourself. So finally, it's always interesting to hear you again, primarily. Let's start with the geopolitics because lots of things are happening. Recently, you were on Beer Biceps podcast, and I think you covered a lot of things there. So let's try to do something different, which has happened very recently. It's Iran and Pakistan, and also it happened somewhere around that timeline when Jay Shankar, our foreign minister, Dr. S. Jay Shankar, was in Iran, and something happened with Pakistan. So, what is this going on? Why are they fighting?
Yeah, well, as we know, Pakistan is a terrorist nation. It's a state sponsor and state supporter of terrorism. They give shelter to various kinds of terrorists within their own territory. Some of these terrorists, they themselves have created, they themselves control. Some of the terrorists, well, they take root themselves, they spring out themselves. And there are various causes the terrorists fight for. But primarily the Pakistan government, which is the Pakistan army itself, is the sponsor and the one that gives shelter to terrorists. I think this is a known and established fact worldwide. Okay? And we in India have borne the brunt of terror from Pakistan for decades. For decades, Pakistan sent terrorists into India to carry out various acts of terrorism. It's only in the last 7, 8, 9 years that India has taken a more hardline stance against Pakistani terrorism, and we have seen the surgical strikes, the Balakot retaliation, and so on and so forth. So now the Pakistanis know they cannot mess with India too much. The Pakistanis have also made the Afghans suffer for decades. Okay, Afghanistan has been devastated by the Pakistanis. The Pakistanis sought what they call strategic depth in Afghanistan. And right now it's coming back to bite them because Afghanistan is no longer pro-Pakistan. The Taliban regime is not a friend of Pakistan. And then the third neighbor is Iran.
Okay. Which I think, being Indians, we don't realize that Pakistan actually shares border with Iran.
This was our border with Iran. For thousands of years, we had this border with Iran. Today, it's Pakistan's border with Iran. It's a temporary state of affairs, but we'll not talk about that. So, Pakistan has a significantly long border with Iran. And half of the historical region of Balochistan is under Pakistani occupation, and about roughly is inside Iran currently. Okay, yes.
So even Balochistan is in Iran?
Half.
Oh, wow.
Half. Okay. So if you look at eastern Iran, that's essentially southeastern Iran. There is the other half of Balochistan that we don't really think about. So now what happens is that Pakistan and Iran have an interesting relationship. So when Iran was ruled by the Shah of Iran, Mr. Pahlavi, Mohammad Raza Pahlavi. So Mr. Pahlavi was a pro-American leader. Okay, this is before 1979 I'm talking about, until 1979. In 1979 we had the Islamic Revolution and the Ayatollahs came to power. So until 79 Mr. Pahlavi was ruling Iran. At that time Pakistan and Iran were both kind of pro-US states, nations. Okay, and when Pakistan went to war with India 65, 71, I think they took out some of their fighter planes and sent them to Iran for safekeeping. Okay, and the Iranians, the Shah regime, they allowed this to happen. So they were kind of pro-Pakistan at the time. Now, after the Islamic Revolution, when the current government of Iran, its predecessor, came to power, the regime of the Ayatollah Khomeini, then things changed significantly between Pakistan and Iran. So we have to always look at the history. To understand why something has gone wrong here, we have to look at the background. How did this happen? What's the history behind this? So when the new Ayatollah regime came in power in Iran, that was a theocratic regime, a Shia Islamist regime. Okay, that's the state religion and ideology, Shia Islam.
The extreme Shias, you can say.
Oh, well, you can view it whichever way you want, but it's a theocratic regime. And Pakistan, we know, is a Sunni Islamic nation, mostly. So there is a Shia-Sunni angle. And Pakistan, as we know, has always been, for the longest time, a US proxy, US vassal, like my favorite word, vassal. For some time, they were a Chinese vassal as well, but now they're back in the US camp. And Iran and the US have the most difficult relationship. So when the Ayatollahs came to power, there was this hostage crisis. They took all the large number of American embassy staff as hostage, and that went on for a very long time. So the US sees Iran as an antagonistic nation, and Iran calls the US Shaitan-e-Buzurg, the great Satan. So Iran's number one and number two enemies interchangeably are Israel and the US. Okay, Israel and the US. The Americans did a proxy war against Iran via Iraq. The Iran-Iraq war, which went on for the best part of the 1980s. There was a proxy war which essentially devastated both nations.
Okay.
So Iran is a very anti-US nation. All right. Iraq is under US occupation more or less right now. And on the other hand, on the east of Iran, you have Pakistan, which is another US proxy. So that is the stage that has been set. And the Iranians accuse the current Pakistani government to do what it does best, terrorism. So they say that Pakistan is sheltering and harboring anti-Iran terrorists on Pakistani territory.
Okay.
So I don't know what calculations went on within Iran that we should do this at so and so time and all that. But they launched a cross-border strike, missile strike, I believe, on certain terrorist positions within Pakistan, okay, on Pakistani territory. And apparently this was right when Dr. Jaishankar was there or right after he left. I'm not sure exactly.
Somewhere around that.
Yeah, very close to Dr. Jaishankar's official visit to Iran. So the Iranians launched this missile strike and the Pakistanis claimed that it killed civilians. That's what they always claim. And then the Pakistanis responded by launching a strike of their own, maybe multiple strikes, which hit targets within Iran. And Pakistan claimed that Iran is sheltering anti-Pakistan terrorists.
Okay.
So both nations are accusing each other of terrorism. And both nations, Iran started and Pakistan retaliated in doing these cross-border strikes. At the same time, Iran had also done some other strikes in some other nations, whether it was Iraq or somewhere else, I don't remember, but they had done that. So the Americans accused Iran of doing cross-border strikes against three nations. And they condemned the Iranian strikes against Pakistan. The Americans have never condemned any Pakistani terrorist activity, by the way. You know, in the 80s...
Historically, they have not done that.
I'll tell you what, exactly, that's what I'm coming to.
Okay.
In the 1980s, 70s, 80s and 90s, Pakistan was a full-fledged US proxy. They got large amounts of cash and weapons and arms and ammunition and logistical support and diplomatic support, all of that from the US. So the Pakistani terrorist regime or the Army ISI regime was essentially financed and funded by the US. Okay? So India has suffered decades of Pakistani terrorism funded and financed by the US. That's what we have suffered. The Kashmir exodus that happened, that was all done by Pakistan with American funding and American blessings and so on. So we have to remember that. So America is right now supporting Pakistan because Pakistan is on their side. It is their attack dog, let's say. Okay, I don't want to be derogatory by comparing the nation to a dog, but you know what I mean. It's a figure of speech. Euphemism.
Derogatory to a dog.
Okay, so that's what Pakistan is. Just like North Korea is China's attack dog, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's what Pakistan is. And as long as Pakistan is on the US side, the Americans have, this means of not only keeping India kind of off balance, but also Iran off balance, right? So the Iranians decided to launch this counter-terror strike against Pakistan, and the Pakistanis responded, retaliated, and the relations between the two nations are very bad right now. The Pakistanis had expelled the Iranian ambassador from Pakistan, and they had brought back their ambassador from Iran. I think diplomatic relations are kind of restored right now, but the overall relationship between the two countries is tense and not friendly at all. So if you look at Pakistan, they have three neighbors: India, Afghanistan, Iran. They don't have good relations with either of them. No one likes Pakistan. That's the situation right now. Now, if you look at Pakistan versus Iran, and if you compare the two nations' respective strengths, then I would say that overall Pakistan has an advantage. Okay. They have a larger population. Land area, I'm not sure which is larger, but maybe Pakistan could be slightly larger. Maybe Iran, I'm not sure.
They are similar, I think.
Let's say roughly similar. The Pakistani economy is kind of slightly bigger than Iran. If not, I'm not sure.
But does it matter because they both are so bad?
I think Iran overall, I'm not against Iran actually. I would like to see the people of Iran prosperous and happy.
Yeah.
But Pakistan is a problematic nation.
But Iran is an oil economy?
Iran is completely 100% self-sufficient and in surplus when it comes to energy production.
Okay.
Yeah, they're a net exporter of energy, whether it is oil, gas, or whatever.
So their economy should be better than Pakistan.
They
right?
have suffered from US sanctions.
Yeah.
which is why their economy has been depressed for a very long time, and they are kind of cut off from the global economy because of these sanctions. So that's why their economy is not doing well, their GDP is down and so on and so forth. Economic growth isn't great. But if you look at the military strength, well, how do you measure military strength? All you can do is you measure the military budgets of each country.
Okay.
If you look at that, Pakistan is again higher. And Pakistan's trump card is the nuclear weapons. Pakistan is a known nuclear weapons power. I don't know how much they have. The world's official figures say 160 or whatever nukes. Well, those are okay.
I've seen one of your podcasts where you have actually deciphered it, that they let us know that they have very less numbers, but actual intelligence reports say something else.
Yeah, see, Pakistan, I would not think they would have more than 200, 250 nuclear warheads or the amount of fissile material needed for that. India, it's a whole different story. I'll not go into numbers right now. Okay, I'll not go into the numbers.
You have done that breakdown in one of your videos.
I must have done that. When it comes to Iran, it is quite possible, maybe even likely, that they may have sufficient fissile material, uranium, weapons-grade uranium, for maybe 5 to 10 nuclear warheads. It is possible.
Wow.
Oh, they have been running the nuclear program for a very long time. Nuclear enrichment program, separating, taking uranium hexafluoride and separating it into, using centrifuges. They have a Natanz facility and other facilities. The US-Iran nuclear deal was supposed to put a cap on that, but President Trump unilaterally walked out of it. So Iran is again free to do whatever it wants when it comes to the nuclear, to their nuclear ambitions. And that was in 2018, 2017. So that's quite a few years ago, at least 5, 6 years ago. So the Iranians possibly may have a sufficient amount of fissile material for a few nuclear weapons. It's possible. But let's say they don't have it, and the Pakistanis have so many numbers. So overall, if you look at the balance of power, Iran-Pakistan, Pakistan seems to have the upper hand. Just based on pure statistics, pure data, pure numbers.
Plus backing of the US?
That is the most important X factor.
Because they also bringing in a narrative war, I think.
It's a narrative war. Also, they get whatever logistical help they may need from the US. And also, if the two nations go to war, the US may want Pakistan to survive the war because they need it against India also. Look, there are no friends in geopolitics. It's all about the balance of power and using one nation against another to get your work done and to advance your own national interests. And the most powerful nation by far in the world is the US, and they have interests everywhere. They have interests in the subcontinent, our subcontinent. They have interests in the Asia Pacific. They have interests in Central Asia, in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, North Africa, everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
So, and they want a certain balance of power in all these regions. Look at the Persian Gulf region. There was a certain balance of power in the 1980s. Okay? And if you look at the same region and take a snapshot of the power balance in 1992, it's totally different because the Americans destroyed the balance of power by almost destroying Iraq. And then they finally finished that in 2003. So this big power that was giving a certain kind of balance vanished, which is Iraq, Saddam Hussein's Iraq. So the Americans changed the balance of power in the Second Gulf War by eliminating the entire Iraqi nation as a potent, powerful force.
Absolutely.
So I would say that the Americans want Pakistan to remain in place as a reasonably powerful country in this region to keep a certain balance of power. So if there is a war between Iran and Pakistan, the Americans would want Pakistan to prevail. But I would say that from the pure logic of strategy, it makes no sense for Pakistan or Iran, either of them, to go to war because they are roughly equally powerful countries. I would not say that Pakistan is twice as powerful as Iran, maybe somewhat more powerful than Iran. So unless you are significantly more powerful than another nation, it makes no sense to fight, because you're going to end up losing more than you gain.
Yes.
And the same applies to Iran as well. They already have enough problems of their own. They already have enough enemies. Okay, there are many nations in their neighborhood that fear Iran and are not exactly friendly towards Iran. So it doesn't make sense for them to start a new war somewhere else. So I would say that what's happening now is the logical outcome, that both nations are cooling down the tensions, but there's not going to be a friendly relationship between Pakistan and Iran, that's for sure.
So other than the border issues, there is nothing else that triggered this kind of a missile strike or missile exchange?
See, there are multiple things that are not visible. Pakistan is a US proxy. The US must be using the Pakistan-Iran border for maybe espionage activities, for spying on Iran. Maybe the Pakistanis with foreign money are sending terrorists into Iran, right? there are all kinds of things. The border is settled. It's not a disputed border.
Okay.
But the population on both sides is the same.
Okay.
The Baluchi people. Yeah, I mean in the southern parts of.
Okay, so Balochi people are not dispersed from there.
They live there. So,
They still live there.
yeah, in Pakistan, in Balochistan, you have Balochi people. On the west of the border with Iran, you still have Balochi people, same language, same customs, same ethnicity. Yeah. And
But is it that US, because you said proxy, US, is it using Pakistan Iran border to have some kind of influence or upper hand or kind of pricking Iran, where they are actually also having some proxy wars with Israel?
yeah, see, I'll tell you what, Iran is a very interesting nation. Iran is a nation that, if you look at the ethnic makeup within Iran, only roughly 50% of the citizens of Iran are Persians, Parsi. When we think about Parsi, we think about Zoroastrians, I mean ethnic Persians.
Okay.
Only half of the people in Iran are ethnic Persians. There's a large population of Balochis. There's a large population of displaced Afghans, which is Pashtun people.
Okay.
There is a large Arabic population of ethnic Arabs. There's a large Azeri population, Azerbaijani origin people.
Azerbaijan is also Arabic, right? No, it does not.
Turkic.
Oh, it's Turkic. Okay.
It's Turkic. And during the Turkic occupation of Iran, there was a Turkic occupation of Iran just like there was a Turkic occupation of India. Nadir Shah, who invaded India and did the massacre in Delhi, was an Iranian ruler, but he was a Turk. He was not a Persian. Okay? So during the Turkic occupation of Iran, lots of people from the Caucasus region were settled in Iran. And that's how the ethnic makeup of Iran changed. So today, about half of Iran is Persian and half is other ethnicities. And the rulers are obviously the Persians because they are the original people of Iran, but they kind of, rightly or wrongly, don't trust certain ethnicities, okay? And a significant portion of the armed strength of Iran is used in policing the territory of Iran, okay?
There's always some tensions with the women side where hijab is a problem.
That is a whole different issue.
Which we usually see in the news.
So that's the Western media which loves to bring out these things. And I'm not saying it's wrong. There are protests and all that. I would say it's an internal matter of Iran. It's none of our business. Let them deal with it. Who are we to pass judgment or say this should be done, that should be done? The Iranian people should decide for themselves what is right and what's wrong. So there are issues within Iran, like I said. Similarly, in Pakistan, if you look at that nation, it is a nation that is held together by force.
Yeah.
Okay? Sindh, the people of Sindh would be happy to be independent or with India. The people of POJK would very much want to be reunited with India. The people of Balochistan want freedom.
Yeah.
The people of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa want to be reunited with Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So what is left? Punjabistan. So Pakistan has its own massive internal
They don't want
problems.
Punjab again?
Oh, whatever. I mean,
Because Khalistani people don't want the Pakistan Punjab.
oh, that is a whole different
That's
story.
a whole
Yeah, that's a whole different story. So Pakistan has even bigger internal problems, and a great amount of its own military strength, or whatever you want to call it, is used in just keeping the nation together. So both nations have significant internal harmony and cohesion issues. Pakistan much more than Iran, I would say. Okay. So overall, it doesn't make sense for two nations like this to go to war. But you had a war between Iran and Iraq, and there was a ruinous war, not just for Iran, but also for Iraq. It significantly depleted the strength of Saddam Hussein's military and overall, economic machine. And he was used as a proxy by the Americans. So I think the Americans do not want Iran to disappear. Otherwise, they would have invaded long ago. So they want to maintain a certain balance of power, most likely. But Pakistan is a problem for everybody.
So, but if I want to go back to the Iran problem,
Yeah.
what actual problem does US have with Iran? That this kind of tensions are always there.
Once again, to understand that, you have to go back in history. There was a Shah, the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. He was, let's say, very pro-US ruler. And he essentially gave the US and the West monopoly on Iranian oil. Iran is a major producer of oil.
Yeah.
Okay? In between, there was this ruler called Mohammed Mossadegh who wanted to nationalize the oil industry. And I'll not go into the details there.
Can you give me a timeline where what year this was happening?
So I'm talking about the 60s. Okay,
60s.
Mohammed Mossadegh was ousted sometime in the 60s. The viewers can obviously do their own research to find out exactly which year it was. But Mohammed Mossadegh was in favor of nationalizing the oil industry and bringing the profits to the service of the Iranian people and the Iranian nation. And the Americans and the British oil, etc., they were very unhappy about this because they had this monopoly on Iranian oil and they were benefiting from this. For example, France was buying uranium from Niger at less than $1 per kilo. And they buy the same amount of uranium ore from Canada at $200 per kilo. So isn't that theft? Similarly, something like that would have happened with Iran.
Okay.
And so Mohammad Mossadegh, the prime minister, he was ousted in a coup. And the Shah was put into power and he was very pro-US, pro-West, and he allowed his nation to be exploited to a certain extent by the West. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's why they liked the Shah, because he had opened up his nation to them, do whatever you want, take our oil and we'll give you whatever benefits you want, whatever discounts you want or whatever privileges you want when it comes to the oil industry. Then the Ayatollahs come to power 1979 and they stop all that. So this great big golden goose is gone.
But how did they come back? Because US would not allow that, right?
Well, sometimes when you are so far away, the US did not want to lose the Vietnam War also, but they lost.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always work out the way you want.
Yeah,
it's so far away. And that's why the Americans have military bases all around the world. Do you know how many military bases the US has? More than 750 extraterritorial military bases.
Outside the US?
Outside the US.
Wow.
Look at the map of the Middle East where the bases are. Iran is kind of more or less surrounded. Pakistan is there. There is Iraq, which is currently under US occupation. There are nations in the Saudi Peninsula.
They were supposed to leave Iraq, right? They were calling the soldiers back.
Well, that
didn't happen.
You see, there is something called democracy and the rule of law and the global rules-based world order. There is something called that. And then there is something much more basic, which is power. And power respects no law.
Yes.
Power abhors a vacuum. Wherever there is less power, another power will come and replace it. So that's just the nature of power. And the US will always follow its interests. The US is a continuation of the British Empire, an augmentation of the British Empire, a more powerful incarnation of the British Empire. So yeah, that's the deal. So that's why the Americans don't like Iran, because the Iranians kicked out their stooge from Iran. Okay, maybe he was a good ruler in other ways, but he had opened up the nation to being exploited by the West. And that's why he was the favorite of the West, the darling of the West. And then this revolution happens, the Islamic revolution, which means the people were sick and tired of this Shah and his policies. And they themselves essentially kicked him out.
So that's why it's been again difficult to conduct any other coup to outstir the...
And you know what's funny? Ayatollah Khomeini, who became the supreme leader of Iran after 79, he was in exile during the rule of the Shah in France. France had given him shelter.
Okay, that's very weird.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, in NATO, there's one nation that has a somewhat independent foreign policy. That is France.
And that's the key word is somewhat.
Quasi-independent foreign policy. To some extent, their foreign policy is constrained by the framework of NATO and other things, but they have their own independent nuclear deterrent, and they have their own arms industry, and they have their own foreign policy, which is why they are so close with India, for example. Monsieur Macron he was in India yesterday or today?
I think he's still here.
He's still here?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so India and France have a very good relationship, because France is kind of somewhat independent from NATO and the US. That's why. They are free, they are more free to pursue their own national interests compared to a nation like Germany, which has zero freedom, zero sovereignty, or Japan for that matter. So there we are.
I think France is one of the only countries or major powers that actually openly has the neo-colonies in Africa and other places.
Well, yeah. So in those matters, they are kind of in tandem with the US to some extent. See, I'll tell you what, the most powerful entity or the biggest power in the entire continent of Africa is the US.
Oh, okay.
Just like the major power in Western Europe is also the US. It's not Germany, it's not France, it's the US that is the major power in Western Europe. Similarly, in Africa, the major power is the US. No African nation can dare to cross certain lines when it comes to the US. If you do certain things against the interests of the United States, there is going to be consequences and very terrible consequences, as we have seen so many times. Regime change, coup d'etat. So many African leaders were ousted and executed in various coups. And if you read the history from the 60s, 70s at least, then you can see who was behind that. And the French have also had a significant presence in, especially in northern and western Africa, the Sahel region, which is called the African Coup Belt, and of course North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, all that. And they control the economies of this region, the French, because there are two versions of something called the CFA franc, the central, whatever the full form is. So these nations, they use a French issued currency issued by the Bank of France, and the French decide what is the exchange rate and all that. And they also charge something called seigneurage, which means a certain amount of money they will take for printing the currency. So these nations are economically hostage to France.
If you want to register a company in, let's say, Senegal or in that belt, you can go to Paris, you can get it properly registered there in witness of the registrar, and it will be even better than to register in Senegal, let's say.
So what does it tell you? Where's the sovereignty? There's no sovereignty when it comes to these African nations. Okay, so yeah, that is the deal. So the French have this neo-colonialist kind of stranglehold on certain nations in Africa, on a large part of Africa. I would say if you look at France's power projection, it could be 5 to 10% of the world.
Okay.
Possibly, including their Indian Ocean territories and all that. Because they have the island of Réunion, they have other Indian Ocean islands, and they have a significant presence in Africa. To some extent, some influence in North Africa as well. So they have a significant power projection ability and capability. And that's why they have this nuclear deterrent. They also have at least 1 or 2 aircraft carriers, at least one that I know of. So yeah, the French are a major player, but they are part of NATO. And when you're a part of NATO, you have to play by certain rules. And the big boss is the US.
So if you want to know anything about France and Niger, we talked about this in our last podcast.
Okay.
I'm sure you don't remember because you do so many podcasts. But we did talk in detail why they were also supposed to carry out a pipeline, which now is in tandems because Niger has decided to, uproot that thing, take over the government. So again, let's get back to the Iran problem. In the second week of January, I was in Israel. We went to Jerusalem, the south border. I was just 800 meters away from Gaza Strip. I was literally at the Israel border of Gaza, wearing bulletproof vests. I even went to Tel Aviv. Although after that experience of Jerusalem and Gaza, Tel Aviv didn't leave a lot of impression on me personally. Did help me understand why we connect so much with the Israelis and the Jews. But one thing which stood out among them, the line about the war, was that eventually this war will boil out because once they get done with Gaza or Hamas, basically they say Hamas. So because again they say they can't differentiate between a civilian and the Gazan soldier because they're all dressed the same. So they attack, they get into the bunker or some kind of a building, abandoned building. And recently they did a booby trap where 21 Israeli soldiers died because they booby trapped a building. They lit a bomb and the building collapsed on them. The same way they say now after Hamas is done, they are going to go to Hezbollah. And then probably that same belt where Lebanon and I think Syria is there. Eventually they say this war, if it ever ends, is going to end with Iran and Israel coming head to head right away, because right now it's all proxy war. Where do you see this? Do you think, because again, as we talked, Pakistan being a little more powerful than Iran, but Iran at the same time has war fronts at, as you said, Iraq, Pakistan, and then you can say they are also giving some kind of support to Hezbollah, Hamas. So it's actually more than 3. It's 3 or 4 or 5 fronts. What do you think? how is Iran that powerful, first of all, and then where do you think this actually evolves into? Will it go to that head-to-head war?
So Iran, once again, is a fascinating case study. It's a very interesting nation. First of all, we, India and Iran, historically, for thousands of years, have had very close ties. Okay,
Yes.
we are like, just a very brief historical detour. The Persian Empire, the Achaemenid Empire, Darius, Kurush, Cyrus the Great, Darius the Great, all these great kings, they were greatly militarily expansionist. They had these militaristic policies, expansionist policies, and they fought the Greeks, they fought the Romans, they fought everybody, right? Such a powerful empire. One entity they never fought was India. Why did Persia never fight India? I would like the viewers to think about this and introspect.
Yeah.
Why did such a powerful empire, for centuries, so powerful, never ever fight India? Therein lies certain historical truths. Anyway, coming back to present day Iran. Iran is not an extraordinarily powerful nation. It is what you would call a middle power or a regional power. But what makes Iran stand apart from many other nations is their appetite for risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, they have this great appetite for risk. They have developed a significant power projection ability. And certain things have helped them. For example, if you look at the neighboring nation of Iraq, about 40% of the population of Iraq is Shia.
Oh.
So big surprise, right?
Yeah.
About 40% of the nation, of the population of Iraq is Shia. And that's why the Iranians have a significant amount of influence, and maybe more, within Iraq. They have a significant amount of influence within Syria as well. They have influence, obviously Syria, southern Syria is Hezbollah, and they have influence and other ties with Hamas allegedly as well. They have ties with the Houthis in Yemen, of the Ansarullah faction within Yemen. So in Yemen you have the official government and you have the Ansarullah faction, which are also known as the Houthis. So Yemen is a whole different story. We will not talk about that at this point. So Iran, over the past several decades, has developed a significant power projection ability and significant extraterritorial interests in all these nations. And they have sent generals and army personnel to go and train people over there to fight the local government or to advance Iranian interests. They've sent weapons and they've sent know-how. They may have even sent proxy soldiers or whatever. So Iran has a significant outreach in this manner.
They even have a lot of technology capabilities and their drones are very good. That's what I've heard from you.
Yeah, so the Russians are using one of the Iranian variants of drones, the Shahed 2 or whatever it's called. Very good drones, not extremely high technology, but very reliable, very good drones, very efficacious. You know what? If you have a decent enough drone in large quantities, it will do the job. So, and the Iranian technology, even when it comes to drones and all, is good. They, about a decade and a half or so ago, they had captured an American drone, which crash landed in Iran. Okay. And then they reverse engineered it and they made their own copy of that. And now they are using that also. So, and they have good missiles and all that. They have ballistic missile capabilities and much more. So they are a decent power. They are not a pushover.
Plus they are unofficial nuclear power?
Possibly. It is a possibility. I mean, they have had enough time to probably make enough fissile material for 5 to 10, possibly, perhaps, nuclear warheads, kiloton warheads, one could say. Not megaton, but kiloton warheads for sure. So it's possible that they may be an undeclared nuclear power, but they would not want to declare it, possibly, until it's necessary. And obviously, the great power that they are fighting against is Israel. So they allege that not Shin Bet, Mossad has been carrying out strikes within Israel, within Iran, killing Iranian nuclear scientists and other army personnel. They make these allegations. And there seems to be a kind of proxy conflict going on between Iran on the one hand and the US and Israel on the other hand within other nations. Maybe in Syria. So Syria almost fell. Syria almost fell in the early 2010s. The Assad regime almost got wiped out. What prevented them from being wiped out is the intervention of Mr. Putin.
So, because Assad is actually backed by Russians, right?
By Russia. And that's why Assad is still there. And Syria is now back on its feet. So the US wanted to eliminate Assad and bring about a revolution or whatever, regime change in Syria. Did not work because Putin himself got involved and he stationed weapons and fighter aircraft and whatnot and ships at the Latakia base in Syria and so on. So Russia has stabilized Syria and Iran also has somewhat of a role to play in this. And when it comes to Iran, their major allies, so to say, are Russia on the one hand and China on the other hand. China is involved. So the Chinese and the Iranians have signed some strategic agreement, some strategic deal, 25-year strategic partnership, and the Chinese are investing about $300-400 billion in Iran. And obviously what the Chinese want is energy, oil, mainly.
And they also brokered a peace deal with Saudi and Iran, right? China?
Well, those two nations, they anyway were going to go to peace. So what happened is that the Iranians, the Saudis, I believe, executed somebody called Nimr.
Their own journalist.
No, not a journalist. He was a cleric. I think a Shiite cleric.
Okay.
And in response to that, the Iranians and the Saudis, they had this diplomatic falling out. And there was a breakdown of diplomatic relations. So now they have re-established diplomatic ties. Doesn't mean that they're friends again. But they're talking now to each other.
And they both came to BRICS.
Yeah, both are now part of BRICS.
Yeah,
that's nice. The UAE is also part of BRICS now. UAE. Yeah.
I think UAE is always a more stable country in this aspect.
Very stable country. Yeah. No issues in the UAE. Very stable, very peaceful. All they want is development. All they want is progress. Even the Saudis only want that now. They want development. Sorry?
Mohammed bin Salman.
Mohammed bin Salman is a very young, ambitious man with big hopes and big aspirations for his country, which is good. He wants progress, he wants development, he wants the nation to go forward, he wants tourism, he wants infrastructure. So he wants stability and peace. He doesn't want war in his neighborhood. And he would like, most likely, for sure, to have good relations with Israel. Just settle the issue and just go forward with our lives. That's what he wants. So all these issues are a problem for Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So when there is instability in the region, these people, they don't want instability, they want stability. So they kind of look at Iran with fear. The Saudis are way more powerful than Iran.
Yeah.
Way more powerful than Iran. But they don't want war. They still don't want war. They don't have this big appetite for risk. They don't have a big appetite for war. Because they have been investing so much money in their country, developing all this. And if there's a war, you stand to lose much of it. Why would you do that? So the Saudis don't want any war.
Plus they have a lot of internal politics that is not very stable, right?
Where?
They're always Saudis.
So Saudi Arabia is a monarchy.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not a democracy. They don't pretend to be a democracy. They are clear that we are a monarchy. We have a monarchical system. So the current king, I forget who's his name, but the real ruler now is Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who's a crown prince of Saudi Arabia.
His name is Mohammed bin Salman. Mohammed bin Salman bin Saudi, something like that.
Possibly. I know him as MBS. I'm a very simple guy.
MBS, yeah.
I keep things simple. MBS, MBZ, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. So yeah. So the Saudis want peace. They want development. They want more interaction with India. They want better relations with India. So does the UAE. And the rising strength of India actually makes them happy that now they, perhaps in the next coming decades, they don't have to keep sucking up to the US.
Yes.
And there is a bigger regional power that's emerging now. And we are now doing anti-piracy operations all the way close to the Red Sea and the east coast of Africa.
Recently it was conducted.
Yeah, a couple of these operations happened, anti-piracy operations. So it tells you what kind of reach the Indian Navy has, what kind of power projection abilities India actually has. India has always been a nation that is risk averse, that doesn't want to fight anyone. But that's why they call India the sleeping elephant. But imagine India becomes slightly more active than what happens, you know. So India is
now we are not sleeping elephant.
No.
We are awake now, but we are silent right now.
We are silent. We don't want to unnecessarily start any nonsense with anybody. India also wants development and progress. At least 20 years of growth, that's what we want. So we don't want to start any war with anybody. We don't want to go and fight somebody else's war. If somebody is fighting, we say, go to, maintain peace, but we don't interfere. But if there are our interests being threatened somewhere, we're going to take action. And we are capable of taking action. So when you target Indian ships in the Gulf region, in the Persian Gulf region or the Red Sea region, we're going to send our ships there, warships there, and we can take care of ourselves. That's what we are demonstrating right now. And that actually is something that gives a great amount of reassurance to nations like the UAE and Saudi Arabia. That India they know it's not a hegemonic nation, it's not a threat to anybody, but it can maintain the peace.
Yes.
And that is actually good for them because they would like more stability. So that's the situation. So Iran is a nation that has this big appetite for risk. They've already fought a tremendous war with Iran, tremendous, horrible, ruinous war for both countries. Both nations suffered a lot, tremendous damage both nations took, but they emerged out of it and they have abilities and they see Israel as the big enemy. And it's obviously a religious issue as well. So that's how it is. So for them, it's the US number one and number two is Israel. The regional enemy is Israel, and the bigger overall enemy is the US for them. And they obviously also don't see Saudi Arabia as a very friendly
because
neighbor.
They are Sunni
And that too. So the Shia Sunni thing is there, and obviously they have conflicting interests. Iran was an empire. Persia was an empire.
Yeah.
Okay. The Saudis were also an empire. The Arabs, they also had their own empire. These are two different empires of two very different ethnicities, two very different cultures.
And then there's also Turkey.
Turkey. So if you look at Turkey, they have a reasonably good power projection ability. Their overall national power isn't that big.
What do you mean by power projection ability, if you can simplify it for us?
So how far can you project your hegemony beyond your borders? So one of the ways to calculate your power projection is how many extraterritorial military bases do you have and what area do they cover? Another way of looking at it is how many vassal states do you have? The third is how many nations are under your direct military occupation? Fourth is where do you have economic and political hegemony? So the US, it essentially owns the whole of Africa. It has economic, political hegemony almost everywhere in Africa. The entirety of the EU and NATO is under complete US hegemony. So that's how you calculate power projection. What percentage of the globe is under some kind of hegemony of yours? So if you look at Turkey, they control northern Cyprus. Okay. Azerbaijan is kind of their vassal, you could say. They have forces deployed in parts of Syria. They have forces deployed in some parts of Iraq, allegedly. They also have forces in North Africa. So they have this neo-imperial ambitions, and they have a certain amount of power projection ability as well. They have a good military industrial base, they have good technological abilities, and they have this thirst, this yearning for reviving the Ottoman Empire, the Caliphate.
But I think that has come back with Erdogan. But
with Erdogan, yes.
Before that, they were again not trying to do that.
So if you look at the history of Turkey, once again you have to understand the history to understand the nature of a nation, the specific role it plays in the bigger context of geopolitical affairs. So Turkey fought, let's go back 100 years.
Turkey, I just remember that they lost against British Empire in the World War One.
So World War One, they took the side of Germany.
Okay.
And the British tried to invade the Gallipoli campaign, and the Turks fought them back and destroyed the British invasion, which was led by Winston Churchill, which was the brainchild of Winston Churchill. And the guy who defeated the British invasion was Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, who was then just a general, just a commander on that front over there. But he eventually went on to fight the entire Western Allied force in 1920-21. Look it up, please, my friends.
I think they lost in 1920, which I remember.
So they lost the First World War. Turkey came under Western occupation. Istanbul itself was occupied by the West. The Strait of Bosphorus, there were Western warships there that were keeping the peace and all that. And Ataturk was in Anatolia and he fought a civil war. He fought a war of liberation, the Turkish War of Independence. And within a couple of years, he had liberated, so to say, Turkey and expelled the Caliph, expelled the Sultan out of Turkey. And that was the end of the Ottoman Empire. And he established Turkey as a republic, a secular republic, by God. And overall his policies were kind of very liberal. He gave women the same rights as men. And he made various other changes in society. Many people don't like him for that. Okay. But what he showed to the West was that we are a power we are willing to work with you.
Okay.
Okay. And Turkey occupies a very interesting part of the world. It occupies the
entrance from Asia to Europe, something.
Yeah,
like
so it is. So 3/4 of Turkey is in Asia. One small part, what was called Thrace, historically Thrace, that is now western Turkey, that European part of Turkey, and it occupies the straits, the Turkish straits, the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, which connects the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. Extremely strategically important, vital place. Extremely important. So the Turkish are sitting there and they're collecting rent essentially.
Okay.
They're a rent-seeking nation, and they have
Similar
always
to
been.
what Egypt does.
Sorry.
Similar to what Egypt does.
Well,
with
kind
the
of
Suez Canal.
with more power than Egypt.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are only highlighted about Suez Canal. I didn't know about Turkey.
The Straits of Bosphorus, the Strait of the Dardanelles, extremely important strategically, geopolitically. So, I mean, when the Russians want to send warships into the Mediterranean, they have to go through these straits. And when you transit these straits,
Wow.
when you are, let's say, a submarine and you're transiting the straits, you have to come up and show yourself. That's the rule. So the Turks and whoever is there observing on the bridge can see exactly who's sending what where.
Wow.
Okay, a very interesting place. So the Russians have this very powerful Black Sea fleet. And whenever they want to send something into the Mediterranean through there, it can be observed. Similarly, if the Americans are sending something into the Black Sea, even the Russians can observe if they're sitting in Istanbul, Constantinople. So Turkey occupies a very strategic region.
But Turkey right now is on the NATO side, right?
It's part of NATO. Okay?
So it allows Russia to go through that strait.
It's an international strait. Everybody is allowed access. Everybody is allowed passage according to international
They
law.
just take rent.
Rent is in not paisa actually, but geopolitical rent. I mean, they can play one side against another. They can get things done. They can exert influence in a variety of ways. That is what I mean by rent.
Okay.
Not just hard money. That is nothing. Money is nothing. Okay. Power is what matters. They have this power. And of course, they're allowed that power. As long as they play well, they will be allowed to sit there. That's how it works. So Turkey occupies this very important place. They are a part of NATO. They come under NATO. Their military comes under the NATO command. They also have US nuclear weapons on their territory. And maybe US soldiers also possibly. So one could say that Turkey also suffers a slight loss of sovereignty from these perspectives.
So at one place they have their own power projections, but they themselves are under a power.
See how complicated the world is.
And I think
and they
that
also
area-
occupy northern Cyprus. They also occupy northern Cyprus.
I think Greece and Turkey is always at some kind of war.
That is the old rivalry, the old blood enmity that these two nations have. So yeah, that's the deal. Turkey and Greece, Turkey and Bulgaria. Nobody talks about Bulgaria. Turkey and Bulgaria, terrible history. Terrible history. Okay. If you look at the history.
That area is filled with so much, stories and of conflicts, and so complicated because one might be seeming like a friend, but at the other hand, it might not be.
It's very simple. Just study history. You will understand why the conflict happens. Whenever something happens, it looks like it came from nowhere. No. It's all the ingredients were in place. All it needed was a spark. So the root cause of the conflicts in the Balkan region, in Anatolia, in Turkey, all these regions, is the conquest of this region by a Central Asian nomadic race called the Turks. They didn't belong there.
They just traveled there, decided to settle there.
Yeah. So, conquest happens. We in India, we were conquered at various points in time by the Scythians, the Shakas, by the Kushans, by the Greeks. There was no conflict.
Yeah.
But when the Turks came to India and conquered, after many centuries, massive conflict. So there are certain things, certain conquests which go harmoniously. The Scythians conquered northern and western India, and they settled down and assimilated among the population.
Yeah.
If you look at the population of northern western India, many of them will have some Scythian ancestry, some Kushan ancestry, some Hunnic ancestry, some Greek ancestry. No one cares, no one fights.
Greek was very well documented, I think.
All this is documented.
And Kushan was, I think,
Kanishka, who was one of our greatest emperors of all time, he did more to spread India's culture worldwide than maybe after Ashok he was number 2, or maybe he was even better than Ashok at this. Okay, Kanishka, he was a Kushan. He was more Indian than most Indians.
And
he was the greatest servant of India.
Actually from out of India.
His ancestors were from out of India, but their ancestors were also Indians, by the way.
Okay.
The ancestors of the
So
Scythians.
India was more spread out. I think
Central Asia was Indian. Okay, there are lots of ruins in Central Asia that are either Buddhist stupas or ancient Hindu temples. And many of these structures don't exist because something else was built on top of that.
There are some temples, Hindu temples in Azerbaijan, Baku.
There is one, Baku, which is a Hindu-Zoroastrian mixed temple.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there is.
It can be mixed.
Hindus and Zoroastrians have always coexisted. What's the big deal? Persians, Indians, same people.
Actually, some say that after the Saraswati dried, the West the people on West became Asura and they became Sur, the Eastern people. And that's why in their culture, Persian culture, Asuras are the good people and Sur are the villains.
So there was an inversion.
Yeah.
There was kind of Zarathustra. Okay, the guy, the prophet of the founder of this religion called Zoroastrianism, he kind of inverted the system. So in our Vedic system, there are Devas and there are Asuras. Devas are the kind of slightly nicer people. Asuras are kind of slightly naughtier people, right? It's like that. They're not entirely evil, and these are not entirely
They're
good.
actually brothers, cousin
Yeah.
brothers. Yeah.
Okay, two divine races, but some are slightly better, some are slightly darker. That's
More greedier, I can say.
dark as in actions, that sort of thing. So Devas and Asuras. So in Persia, Zoroaster inverted that. He made the Asuras the good guys and the Devas the bad guys. That's all. But if you look at Zoroastrianism, even that is a polytheistic religion. They also worshipped Indra. Okay. They called him what? Vritrahan. Vahram. Vritrahan became Vahram because Indra defeats the great snake serpent Vritra, right? To liberate the oceans of the world, the waters of the world, which is the same story as Zeus, Jupiter, and Thor. Same thing. Vajra.
Even in I think when I went to Israel, they have some snake villain who engulfs all the water from the world, and I could not recollect Vritra name at that time.
The Jews have this story.
Jews also have this kind of story, I think.
Okay, I was not aware of this. That's interesting. I'll look it up.
I have to, because I have the recordings, I have to now sort through all the content that I have recorded there. I'll have to come up with it.
Yeah, so that's what happened between India and Persia. Zarathustra inverted the thing, but the Persians and Indians were the same people, essentially. Essentially the same people.
Yeah.
Today, if you go to Persia, if you go to Iran, you will find people who look almost European, blonde hair and blue eyes and all that. These are the people who were imported from the Caucasus region by the Turks during the Turkic occupation of Persia. The original people of Persia are light brown skin, brown eyes, and dark hair. They look more or less like people from northern or western India.
Okay.
And the language is very similar.
So it again comes back to that Saraswati belt, right?
Look, it may predate that. It may go back to the Rigvedic times.
Okay.
Possibly. But yeah, the Saraswati region was the intersection of India and Persia.
Actually, it binded the whole civilization. Right?
See, if you look at it geographically, Persia is kind of an extension of the subcontinent.
Yeah.
Okay? You can just walk west and you can reach Persia. There is no big boundary in between. There's a desert in between here. Yes. You should carry water, but that's all.
So yeah, let's get back to Turkey, Iran, the same complicated things.
Yeah. So yes, Iran is this nation that... so the Iranians, the Persians had their own empire. They are a nation, they are a people who see themselves as more than a nation state. They see themselves as the continuation of an ancient civilization and empire. The people of Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula, they also were world conquerors. They conquered so many regions. They conquered the whole of Africa, much of Africa. They conquered all the way to Andalusia, which is Spain. Oh yes. Okay. They conquered many parts of Asia. They came all the way to Sindh and so on. So they were conquerors. They spread their religion worldwide, many parts of the world. They spread their language to many parts of the world, right? So they also see themselves as a continuation of a great empire, imperial system and a civilizational system. So Persia and Arabia, two very distinct and different civilizations and empires. Nothing really in common. Even the flavor of Islam each practices is different. Yeah. Shia and Sunni. So yeah, there's always going to be conflict there. There's always going to be conflict.
It's just amazing.
But I'm not saying there should be conflict.
Yes.
I mean, even if you have different ways of life, different points of views, if you have good leadership, then you can find a common ground and you can find ways to coexist. I hope there is peace in this region. And I'll tell you what is the reason why there is no peace. It's always a foreign power that does this. A foreign power that draws lines on the map, straight lines. A foreign power that creates artificial nations like Pakistan and other nations. Okay? A foreign power that extracts oil out of the region and keeps everybody fighting so that nobody can see the bigger picture. Yes. There's always something immediate, something urgent, some urgent fire to put down. So how can we think of the bigger long-term picture? I think the region can have peace again, but it may take time. But I hope there is peace again. For the Arabs, our friends the Arabs, for our Persian friends, for everybody else. There should be peace. There should be progress and prosperity.
Yeah, because from Indian point of view, it's a very complicated issue for us. Because at one point, even Iran are we are bettering the relationships with them. Israel civilizationally or current situations are very similar. Saudi, UAE, very good friends.
Very good relationship.
It's just so complicated for India to, because when even some kind of votes happen in UN, India has to take sometimes side of the Palestine, sometimes they have to take side of Israel. So I don't know, it's just amazing how India has managed to do that and also keep the relations so well.
So it's because we now have a very good and very clear foreign policy. Foreign policy doesn't have to be complicated. Foreign policy can be really simple. You should first of all know exactly what your interests are. What are India's national interests? We want progress. We want economic growth. We are a nation that has had a tremendously horrible past, 1,000 years. Okay, we are a nation that is still one of the poor nations. The average person still has a very low GDP per capita. We want progress. We want prosperity. We want all these things to happen. How do we make it happen? By cooperating with other nations that have similar interests as ours. So let's say there is a nation called Saudi Arabia. Okay, they want progress, they want a more modern nation, they want a more open nation. They also want to keep on trading with other nations and exporting oil, gas, all that. We want oil and gas, they have oil and gas. We have no conflict with them, they have no conflict with us. So why can't we work together? Similarly, the UAE is a major exporter of oil and gas. And 60% of the population of the UAE is from the Indian subcontinent. About 40% is Indians.
Only 12% is roughly Arabs.
Yeah, but very nice people. Yeah. So the thing is, why can't we find common ground with all these nations? So as long as you know exactly what your national interest is, you can look around and see who else in my neighborhood has similar interests. Where do we have convergence of interests? Then go and talk to them. We'll talk about what we can do together, and let's go forward. As long as we don't have any significant conflict, like a territorial dispute or something, we're fine. So with all these Gulf nations, we have no disputes. We have no conflicts.
But this was a similar situation even 10 years ago.
But what was the difference 10 years ago?
But the leadership, what were they thinking?
Well, I am not a mind reader, so I don't know what they were thinking. I don't see what people think and what they may be thinking and what they are saying. I only see the actions. See, when it comes to geopolitics or anything, or just politics or leadership, you must completely ignore the words that come out of somebody's mouth. I don't care what he or she has said, or is saying, or has written. I only care about their actions and the consequences of their actions. That is the only yardstick by which you measure a leader's capabilities. And a leader's, what do you call it? Performance. Performance is the word. The only way to measure, quantify a leader's performance or a government's performance is to see their policies, their actions, and the outcomes of their actions. It doesn't matter what intentions they had. It doesn't matter what wonderful speeches they gave. You know, it is said that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Okay? I don't care what someone's good intentions are. I only see what their actions are. So that is the only realistic way to measure the performance of a government or a leader, or to measure the performance of a foreign policy. So that's what it is. So today you see that so many nations want to work with India. France is very interested in India. Mr. Macron was here, maybe he's still here today. Very good relationship between the two nations. India and Italy, we have completely turned around the relationship now. We're working together.
Melody.
Melody, they say, yeah. Then you have the Gulf nations, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, all these nations, various African nations. We have good relations in Eastern Asia as well. Indonesia, we have good relations there. Apart from Malaysia, everybody with them we have good relations. The only issue is China in Asia. Japan, otherwise, I mean, what can go wrong between India and Japan? Similar culture, similar values. Both nations want progress.
A foreign power sitting there.
Yeah, that is one issue that Japan has to deal with. Obviously, that's not something that we should interfere in, but obviously that problem Japan faces. It's under foreign occupation, like harsh foreign occupation, whether people realize or not.
It is very harsh, it is.
Yeah.
So I think let's end the part 1 of our conversation here, and then I have something a little local but geopolitical aspect which I would like to hear from you. So stay tuned. We are ending the first part here, but don't go anywhere. Part 2 is coming soon. Thank you.